show is here. Yo, our mission is clear. It's time to change healthcare. Have no fear. Today is the day. This is the hour. Together, you know we've got the power. Drop the silos. We're all the same team. Experience, business, tech, and marketing. How can anyone be satisfied with the way things have always been? Yeah, we've tried. So join us now. Join the revolution. Consumer first health is the evolution. Status quo, more like status no. Yeah, this is the healthcare rap. Yo, come on, let's go.
New choices, new platforms, new care models. In the healthcare of tomorrow, consumers win. But who will design it? What will it look like? And how long will it take? We're here to answer those questions with some provocative thinking about how to create the healthcare that people actually want. Ready to roll up your sleeves, look at the world a little differently, and explore the frontiers of consumer health together? Join us. This is the Healthcare Wrap.
Welcome back. I'm Jared Johnson from Shift Forward Health, and here's what's going to go down today. We have the flavor of the week about the collective power of revolutions. How will the movements that are happening in retail, free market medicine, and hospital boardrooms impact the health choices of everyday consumers? And what's your part? I'll talk about that. Then we welcome Blake Madden, founder of Hospitology. There's a good chance that you've read his articles and posts about healthcare M&A, strategy, finance, and markets. Blake shares some of his observations about the impacts of major deals on consumers' health choices and which mergers and acquisitions excite him. Then we wrap up with a rapid-fire round where he shares hot takes on some of the big players. It's time to dive right in. Are you ready? Let's go.
Flavor of the week.
Revolutions aren't for everyone, but there are a lot more happening than most of us realize. And their collective power is what's driving change, not a single player or a single deal. We're spending too much time debating whether Amazon, Walmart, Optum, Kaiser, or fill in the blank is quote-unquote winning. But the collective power of revolutions is what's driving consumers' expectations and lifting their sights above the current state of frustrating, inconvenient, opaque care that was never designed for them in the first place. Revolutions are happening in retail. 10 years ago, who predicted that you'd be seeing accountable care agreements from a drugstore company, the Geek Squad setting up remote monitoring equipment in your home, and access to your primary care provider that integrates with your online shopping? I'm of course referring to CVS, Best Buy, and Amazon One Medical, respectively. Revolutions are happening in free market medicine. Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drug Company offers transparent drug pricing. Direct primary care clinics provide unlimited free office visits at a low monthly subscription with or without insurance. And thanks to the Free Market Medical Association, buyers and sellers of healthcare are developing employer-based plans that cut out the middlemen and reroute around PPOs, networks, or specialty discount vendors. Revolutions are also hopefully happening in hospital boardrooms. Paul Keckley made it clear what he wants to see. Quote unquote, strategies predicated on protecting the past are obsolete. Strategies that consider consumers incapable of active participation in the delivery and financing of their care are archaic. Strategies that depend on unbridled consolidation and opaque pricing are naive. And strategies that limit market access for non-traditional players are artifacts of the Gilded Age gone by when each sector protected its own against infidels outside. I love that. So as usual, the question we ask here is, what does it mean for everyday people who engage with the healthcare system? Remember the two paths that I frequently talk about: optimizing the existing hospital provider insurance-centric model, as well as pursuing entirely new choices that exist partially or fully outside of that model. Revolutions are happening everywhere. When our work becomes about how to help consumers meet their desires to be healthy and well, we have become part of the meaningful work going on in healthcare today. Progress is happening with or without you. It's time for you to acknowledge the revolutions that are happening everywhere and choose whether you'll take part. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow. And that's the flavor of the week.
The flow.
All right, everyone, let's get back into the flow. I'm so excited today. Please give it up for Blake Madden, the founder of Hospitology. Blake, welcome to the Healthcare Wrap.
Thank you, Jared. It's good to be on. I'm very humbled to be on and glad that you invited me.
Remind us where you are based out of. Where do you do a lot of the work that you do?
Yeah, so I am based in Dallas, went to the University of Texas at Austin for school, and Workweek Media, which is kind of like the parent company of Hospitology, is also based in Austin. So I'm a big Texas guy. You couldn't tell.
All right, Blake, what would you like our listeners to know about you personally and professionally? You've had quite an interesting journey here already, and you just recently came up on an anniversary with hospitality. Maybe you can share that with us too.
Yeah, Jared, absolutely. It's been a pretty wild ride. So like I mentioned, graduated from the University of Texas down in Austin, and then, had a degree in finance and didn't really know kind of what I wanted to do, and decided to go into healthcare because that's the industry that my dad has been in for a while, and joined a healthcare consulting firm that specialized in kind of valuation and advisory, and really got to see a lot of healthcare services deals, like kind of behind the scenes, and private smaller deals, and then kind of see trends emerge before they happened. And really, long story short, is that kind of drove my intellectual curiosity, and I wanted to kind of learn more about healthcare, which is it's impossible to know everything. But yeah, so I started a newsletter in 2018, and really that newsletter just kind of snowballed over the next kind of 3 years or so, call it, to the point where Workweek Media, which is where I am now, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're looking for creators to join our media company, which is kind of focused on newsletters and creators and providing infrastructure for writers." And they ended up acquiring my newsletter. So now I'm working full time at Workweek, and we launched Hospitology in late April of 2022. So I'm talking to you just a little over a few weeks from that first post where I wrote a piece on HCA, of course, and it's been fun. So I've grown it from, with Workweek's help, from 2,000 subscribers starting out, legacy newsletter, to now around 24,000 as of this writing, which is really insane because I really feel like I'm just still learning what the media business is, coming from a professional healthcare firm into a media startup where people are wearing t-shirts, and we got all these Gen Zers around and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a fun learning process, and I'm having a blast doing it.
That's outstanding. Well, first and foremost, congrats on the success and that atmosphere, that stratospheric growth. That's sensational. It absolutely is a credit to you and the work you do. I've been a fan and a follower of your pieces here because they are so well thought out and researched. And I find that's something we can use more of, to say the least. So yeah, definitely congrats on all that.
Yeah, thanks so much. And just to clarify, Hospitology, I write about kind of what I traded in prior. So kind of, the business of healthcare. So if anybody's interested in kind of, the finance and partnerships and innovation and venture capital and everything kind of going on behind the scenes, why would Optum buy this physician practice? Or why would CVS buy Oak Street? Those sorts of things. That's my bread and butter. And I love kind of writing and providing, visuals and helping operators and marketers and everyone in their day-to-day job with trying to kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah,
right?
It's a great resource. And it is, like I said, very well researched and documented. So I know topically that fits in with one of the best pieces of career advice I've ever received, which was follow the money. learn what's at the base of any business operations and what's going to make any company successful, and find a way to bring more value to that. But maybe that's a good segue here to ask you, what's one of those pieces of career advice you've received that along the way you feel has shaped where you are right now?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question, Jared. I like that you asked this question. Honestly, I don't know if I can remember a singular kind of piece of career advice. I do have one of my college professors always used to say, in the moment, nothing is as good or as bad as you think it is. So I've kind of always taken that to heart, to where it's like, if something seemingly really bad happens, then it's not maybe going to be as bad as it seems in the moment, right? And then beyond that, I would say, for me, is I try to approach everything with a sense of kind of humility, and I want to try to be coachable and take, constructive criticism in everything I do. And so, how that looks for me in my life is I played sports growing up. And so, I had coaches yelling at me and telling me to fix my form and, whatever, playing football and soccer. And then, when I was at the consulting firm, I listened to my managing directors and took advice from my, senior analysts on how to format things, and lean on people's expertise who know more than you. And then I try to use that same kind of tactic in writing as well, to where I'm able to, I could talk to you about how to start a podcast, or I could talk to industry experts about, what they think about certain market segments, and just kind of just have an intellectual curiosity and, just learn as much as I can. So that's kind of my view on that question, I guess.
So is that one of the ways that you decide on topics? Like, how do you choose what to write about?
That's a good question. How hospitality is set up is a Tuesday send and a Thursday send. And so the Tuesday send is very news driven. It's news cycle driven. And so, if there's a big M&A deal or, big policy, or I think the most recent headline was around Kaiser and Geisinger and kind of Risant Health, those sorts of things, that kind of helps frame my Tuesday send. And then my Thursday send is kind of more open-ended. And I would say that my conversations with folks help guide what I might want to write about. I also try to stay culturally relevant. That's a kind of a big buzzword that Workweek uses is, what are folks talking about in social media, and what are folks debating about, whether it's, is value-based care feasible, or should physicians own hospitals, or, the things like that always can attract eyeballs as well. Those are some tactics I use for that aspect of it. And then ultimately, like my kind of North Star strategy and something that we talk about a lot internally is, who is the one person that you're writing for your audience, right? So like I write a newsletter, and, who is the one person that I'm writing for? So for instance, that could be, the CEO of a health system, or that could be, the founder of a certain startup sector or something. And so that with that framing, it kind of helps me guide what I want to write about and what perspective I'm going to write about it with, and those sorts of things, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. And what I've noticed in your voice, in your writing, is that it is from a very analytical standpoint. It's not trying to be sensational at all. It's trying to be objective and look at the numbers and put some thought and logic into, like you said, why this might work for a certain merger and acquisition, why this might not, why they might be playing in this space versus another space. And I feel like that's one of those things that you've been able to latch on to. And I want to give you a lot of credit for that, because it's not that common. It's also not that common just in general to have many younger voices, I feel like, creating content around healthcare. And I think that's something I definitely see as an opportunity to encourage more younger voices to put that voice out there in whatever form it is, and at whatever level that is. We have this group, this generation of healthcare leaders and executives who have been in and doing their thing and working along a certain way and learning the way that things are done and the way the businesses are run in this industry. And some of those ways are still going to work, but some of them aren't. And sometimes it takes, in my mind, younger voices out there sharing just different perspectives to help start evolving that conversation. And that eventually works its way up into a new generation of leaders in these organizations who come at things from a different point of view. I mean, we can go generation by generation. We won't, but like we could, and say, in general, Gen Xers versus millennials versus those coming up behind them, how they just feel about the world in general, and adding more considerations into a conversation, and not just saying, hey, let's automatically have our business strategy go the way that it has been for the last 50 years, because maybe that's not the right way anymore. To me, that just points to this opportunity again for more young voices to create content about healthcare. I wonder if you have any advice for a younger professional who has an opinion, but they don't know where to get started about sharing that voice.
Yeah. And Jared, I totally agree with you. I think that there's like a ton of opportunity for younger folks and folks just in general to write content. There's so many people with so much subject matter expertise in healthcare, and they're kind of just caught up in the day-to-day. But I would really encourage all those people to dive into content, because honestly, I started this newsletter 2018 and did not think it would open any doors. I did it as a side project because it was fun. And now I'm kind of writing about it full time. And I'm not saying you have to be gung-ho, jump into it 100%, but it does help, with networking and with providing value on what you're seeing to other folks, and just kind of putting, like you said, becoming one of those kind of thought leaders for the next generation. So for me, I would kind of bring up maybe a few things that would help if you're trying to go down like a content journey. The first of which is I would say, find your niche. So find an interesting topic in healthcare. So, maybe it's something in the payer space or something within like growth marketing in healthcare or whatever it is. And then from there, like I mentioned before, who are you writing for? Who's that one person that you want to, frame your audience in your newsletter or your podcast or whatever content you're creating around that one person. Thirdly, and I think this is one of the most important ones as well, is to just find a consistent cadence. If you're posting consistently and providing value in what you're posting, and you are, sharing on social media, and you kind of are following this playbook, you will find success eventually. And it will not happen overnight. It did not for me. Like, I had probably under 1,000 subscribers for the first 3.5 years of my newsletter, but those metrics compound over time. And then finally, I would say don't get caught up in imposter syndrome. And that's something that I get caught up in all the time. It's like, gosh, if I have an opinion on this, somebody's going to put me on blast on Twitter, or I'm going to look like a fool. Nobody knows everything about healthcare. I have barely scratched the surface, and I talk to people, every other day, and they'll have worked in a niche of healthcare I've never heard of for 20 years. And for me, there's just like joy in learning. And nobody has it figured out. And no matter how much it seems like that's the case from the outside looking in. So yeah, would really encourage, again, folks to dive into the content game. And, writing is an incredible soft skill to develop. And I really think it's something worth jumping into if you're interested in doing it.
Well, I'm going to double down on that and say, yes, please. For those who are listening, find a starting point and just dive in. I mean, we need your voices. We need those perspectives. That's how we're going to grow and evolve as an industry. So thanks for sharing that. Stay tuned for more provocative thinking after the break.
Consumer demands, disruptive technologies, and AI are shaping healthcare for years to come. On the Hello Healthcare podcast, we dive deep on these issues with leaders who are driving change. These stories will inspire you to create and demand a better future in healthcare. Learn more at hellohealthcare.com. And now, back to the show.
I'm sure there are topics that are more enjoyable to write about than others, or just like you learn more as you go. But I'm sure some of those topics that you've written about over the last year in particular have been more memorable than others. Are there any that come to mind?
Yeah, that's a good question also. I'm enjoying this. I would say whenever I see some big healthcare deal that overlaps kind of like what I write about in like, traditional healthcare services and like, digital health or like payers or things like that, I really enjoy kind of diving into, what's the play here? What's the rationale? What's the inside baseball? That's what I want to learn about. So, the one that comes to mind recently that did pretty well for me was kind of taking a deep dive into the CVS and Oak Street Health deal. And, from a broader perspective, talking about, okay, so what's going on with the payers? Why are they vertically integrating? What does that unlock for them? And why is Medicare Advantage driving these, multiples in senior clinic player like Oak Street Health or, things like that. So I think attacking a merger from different angles is a ton of fun. Secondly, I love, and this is kind of on the more speculative and like innovation side, but I love writing about innovation in healthcare as well. I've written about kind of the enablement space before, which is more of like a near-term value-based care trends. But then on the other hand, you're seeing a ton of, and I'm sure everybody in healthcare has been talking about generative AI and those sorts of things. So I co-wrote a piece on AI in healthcare recently and synthetic data, and I just love, writing about those kinds of topics. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, good thing is there's probably never going to be a shortage of topics in this space. So
that is very true. $4 trillion, no issues with topics. Sometimes it's like analysis paralysis, right? Because there's so many things to write about. It's like, gosh, what's the best thing to write about? Like, what's going to get the most attention? And so for me, it's like, because I have full editorial control over what I write about, it's like, gosh, what should I write about? So I hope you don't run into that issue, Jared, with your podcast.
Well, like we just do the little monologue, the flavor of the week at the beginning, which is just like a 2-minute summary of a headline. And sometimes there are way too many to choose from. And thankfully, sometimes it evens out a little bit. And, we have a whole month to cover like 4 things that may have happened in the same week, but we can spread it out a little bit. But yeah, I agree. In general, no lack of things to talk about here. So yeah, for sure. So I guess a part of that for me is just, we're talking about perspectives, right? So your perspective of what you see as you do all this analysis, as you write about all these things that are happening, lots of big moves and lots of money being put into different sides of healthcare. What are some of your observations in general just about the current state of the healthcare system in our country? Where are some bright spots and where are some things that in your mind are still very broken?
I got to kind of see the full gauntlet of players while I was working at the healthcare consulting firm in my prior life. And I'd like to say like you could really tell when someone was really in it for like solely the money or solely kind of like the cash grab versus when somebody was in, a transaction or doing something for, to expand access to care or, those sorts of things. So the biggest dichotomy for me probably came into kind of the freestanding ER space, and which, was the Wild West with Adeptus for folks that remember that, and surprise billing and out-of-network billing, balance billing. So during that craze, one of my teammates worked on a deal to where these investors were, specifically targeting a freestanding emergency room in like rural Texas. And like they had outrageous margins on this business because they like specifically and purposefully pursued, a surprise billing strategy, which like was very lucrative. But from our perspective, it was like, okay, we know this is unsustainable. So how do you value it? Right. So it was an interesting kind of tough little project because, it's kind of morally wrong and unsustainable and position 1A of bad actors in healthcare. Whereas, on the other hand, you might have a health system that's opening a freestanding emergency room in a rural setting to kind of provide coverage and care in a rural area where there might not have been, coverage. So it's really interesting. I think that kind of highlights healthcare as a whole to where there are, a lot of good people working to make the whole system better. But there's still kind of, policies that are broken and, the arbitrage financial game is still easy to exploit. So I'm dismayed about that, but excited about kind of, future care delivery models and emerging population specific care and, areas like kidney care or oncology. And then, I know it sounds pretty buzzy, but also, AI in healthcare, could not solve, but really help with, burnout and help with productivity and help physicians, identify polyps more accurately during colonoscopies. Those sorts of things are just I'm just enamored with and excited about.
Very nice. Well, yeah, I see that. I see that can be a big part of just some macro trends here in the industry, especially when we're talking about I think it was Clayton Christensen who referred to that. He wrote a book, The Innovator's Prescription, which talked about care moving as far downstream as possible. So moving to ambulatory surgical centers, moving to urgent cares, moving to freestanding clinics, and having that be one of the business trends that made sense to be more sustainable. But it does take a different infrastructure and it does take a different marketing approach too. So yeah, I mean, it's right in line right there. And yeah, who knows what's going to come next there. To that end, I definitely have not been on the right side of most predictions. I will put it out there. That crystal ball is pretty fuzzy. There's still so much activity, especially when we talk about things like M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions. You write a lot about that just because there is a lot that's happening. But as you typically do write about, there are implications almost every time with a lot of these major deals. Do any of these recent mergers and acquisitions excite you, and why or why not?
Yeah. So funny story on the, wrong predictions thing. I wrote a newsletter when there was kind of, CVS and Oak Street rumors. And I basically said, gosh, I don't think this deal will ever happen. It's overvalued. I don't necessarily see this panning out, that sort of thing. And then of course, like 1 week later, they decide to buy them. So it was funny. It's very, a lesson in humility as I touched on earlier. So that was fun. Honestly, a lot of the mergers that I'm focused on right now are kind of just acquisitions and strategy, I would say revolve around kind of like that multi-specialty space. I really think kind of the next phase of value-based care and, policy and payers are kind of pushing the charge into value-based care. And that conversation will continue to revolve around multi-specialty care because specialty care is such a large component of healthcare spend. I think that we're going to continue to see and hopefully see that team-based approach to where, you've got the PCP working in step with, maybe a nurse practitioner and a dietitian, and they're working with the nephrologist to help, chronic kidney disease patients or whoever with kind of managing total cost of care. And so for that reason, I think that the Summit Health and Village MD deal, with some Walgreens participation, obviously, on the Village MD side, I think that deal is really interesting because Summit is a huge multi-specialty group. And then you have kind of the Village MD, clinic model as well. So things like that, I think, are really interesting. I always keep an eye out for when a bunch of different players come together and partner and form kind of like a collaboration, like what you saw with, I think it was Interwell. Can't remember the other folks in that deal, and then you saw kind of Oak Street Health, maybe it was Oak Street and Interwell kind of partner, so you have like the primary care and the specialty care and those sorts of things. I think that kind of overlap is interesting. And then on the health system side, kind of the more hospital side, I am really interested to see what Kaiser and Geisinger end up doing with Risant. I think Risant is how you say it, because it sounds like, they're really trying to push the needle forward from a population health perspective. And, it sounds like Kaiser is kind of going to sell their expertise and their services into Risant and maybe, push their kind of 1KP, national plan to these systems. So I think that's something to watch for sure. I got very excited when that one came out, and I had some choice capitalized words on Twitter, which was probably an overreaction, but, I'm probably the only one overreacting to health system M&A. So it's fun.
Hey, well, an informed overreaction. I don't know. I think we got plenty of space there for for that kind of reaction to things. And it was at the Oak Street and Interwell. It was Oakwell, I think the name of that one was, like the providing primary care and dialysis centers.
That's right.
Like that. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, to come bring us to a close here, if we can try kind of a new segment here, which is just like rapid fire. If I can give you a few companies that each of them have made headlines, but they're some of the major players out there. And maybe just give me like a quick opinion or a reaction to the company in general. Just anything that comes to mind. And we can just flow through these. There are no wrong answers here. This is just kind of like, I guess, more like word association, but kind of like what comes to mind with these guys. But
no, it's exciting.
All right. Okay.
Let's do it.
Ready? The first one is Optum.
Okay. Yeah. Of course you start off with this one. Gosh, my knee-jerk reaction is just to say unstoppable. They're gobbling up physicians nationwide. They bought, Kelsey-Seybold and Atrius Health and all of these groups. And then they just bought LHC Group. I think that they spent something like $27 billion. Don't quote me on that number, on acquisitions this year, like Change Healthcare. So they're just gobbling up all of these. I mean, we're going to look up and we're all going to be employed by Optum or the United Health Group. So that's my take on Optum.
Nice. The next one is Best Buy Health.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think that they're showing a ton of promise just in the home and in-home care with kind of enabling and setting up remote patient monitoring and hospital at home, especially with kind of, I think, Atrium and Advocate Health they most recently partnered with. I also think that at least for now, their healthcare play is probably primarily like a retail one, to where they're kind of using healthcare as a way to push sales to kind of the tech side, but you might have some pushback there.
No, it's great. All right, we'll keep going. Next one is Walmart Health.
Ooh, I think Walmart Health is really interesting. They kind of went through a lull in the past few years with their strategy. I think they might have lost some personnel without remembering too many of the details, but now they're making a big push to put a lot of Walmart Health clinics in rural areas. So I'm excited to see kind of them provide, a lot of access and primary care services to, Oklahoma and in Georgia and other rural areas. So I'm excited to see what Walmart Health is up to in the future.
Very nice. All right, just a couple more here. CVS Health. And we can lump Oak Street in there if you want. We've already talked about them, but just CVS Health.
Yeah, CVS is really interesting because they're kind of, they acquired Aetna and they've got the pharmacy footprint. So they're kind of playing a little bit of catch up to, the Optums and the Humanas in Medicare Advantage. And so I think that's why you saw them overpay for Oak Street Health. Maybe in the short term, maybe in the long term, it'll be a better acquisition. But yeah, it looks like they're kind of going to, continue to scale Oak Street. And they've actually had some recent headwinds in various areas. And I think that their most recent earnings report, they had some interesting topics of conversation around kind of headwinds in the space. But overall, they're going to be fine. I mean, anybody that's I like to call them kind of diversified healthcare behemoths, the CVSs, the Humanas, the Uniteds of the world. So I think that they're too diversified and in healthcare, they're too big to fail. So they're going to be fine. But they're doing some interesting stuff and they have some interesting investments in names like, Monogram Health and other areas through their CVS ventures. So definitely an area to watch there as well as to where they're investing in.
Gotcha. All right. What about Walgreens?
So it seems like Walgreens kind of core, retail business is stagnant. So they've kind of been pushing into healthcare a little more. You saw them buy CareCentrix. And then, obviously they have the huge investment in Village MD, which honestly has probably been like a lifesaver for them. Again, I think that it's exciting to see what Village MD will do with Summit. And then, how Walgreens kind of leverages that in healthcare to, deliver care in the home or help on the retail pharmacy side. So I personally view Walgreens as not as big of a kind of healthcare player as someone like CVS yet. But I do think Village MD and Summit has a ton of potential, like we talked about.
All right, last one. We'll save maybe the biggest for last. I don't know. But Amazon.
Yeah, gosh, Amazon's been really interesting. So obviously they have the cloud services like AWS Health, but they seem to really be focused on consumer plays in healthcare. So, you saw them buy One Medical, which One Medical's original business was around kind of, the employers and concierge care. I'm not sure what Amazon's going to try to do with the Iora piece, which is kind of the senior clinic piece. But maybe they'll try to roll that into some sort of Medicare Advantage offering or something. And then on the other side, they did announce, I think it was Amazon Clinic and Amazon Pharmacy. They're offering really, really cool, really low cost generic drugs direct to consumer with their prescription, obviously, and then with low acuity telehealth services. So right now, Amazon seems to be kind of skirting around the edges of healthcare and focused on kind of like consumer kind of esque platform plays. I'll be curious to see, if they make like a deeper dive into like healthcare, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. We actually talk about them a lot on this show. So believe me,
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, we got plenty of context there. It's all good. Well, cool. That was fun. And with that, that's actually really a perfect place for us to wrap up. I'll give you a chance here right at the end. If there's a way for people who are interested in connecting with you or following you, to want to remind them where the best place is to find Hospitology and to connect with you.
Yeah. So please, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm just Blake Madden. I should have like a yellow background or Twitter, B_Madden4, same thing, yellow black background. And then if you just Google Hospitology, which is literally just hospital and then OGY attached to the end, all one word, you can find the newsletter there. And would love to connect to folks. I read all of the replies to the Hospitology newsletter and the welcome email and everything. So please feel free to reach out. And Jared, thanks a ton for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we covered a lot in this conversation. So it was fun.
Yeah, well, it's truly been a pleasure to speak with you, Blake. And with that, that's a wrap for this episode. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Blake Madden from Hospitology. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please spread the word. Tell your colleagues to tune in for all the awesomeness, then leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This show is produced by Shift Forward Health, the channel for changemakers. Subscribe to Shift Forward Health on your favorite podcast app, and you'll be subscribed to our entire library of shows. See our full lineup at shiftforwardhealth.com. One subscription, all the podcasts you need, and it's all for free. And remember, we might have a lot of work to do in healthcare, but we'll get there faster together. Thanks again.